We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, Micah Uetricht. He is the associate editor of In These Times magazine, and author of Strike for America, Chicago Teachers Against Austerity. He has a Vice piece out right now about suggesting that firing Chicago's top cop might not be enough to save Mayor Rahm Emanuel's job. And it's not just Rahm Emanuel whose head seems to be on the chopping block. Am I right about that, Micah?
Right. In fact, the maybe more likely, at least in the short term, person to face repercussions for this is State Attorney Anita Alvarez.
And just tell us what has happened. I mean, obviously this was 13 months in the making, but the video is released. It's Alvarez's office who then indicts the cop. And it seems like Rahm Emanuel is very happy to have it all end there, but it doesn't. So just give us a timeline of what's happening and include in that both Rahm Emanuel's call for an investigation an independent investigation of the independent investigation board, essentially, for the police review. And it calls for Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, to investigate.
Right. So the timeline obviously begins with the killing of Laquan McDonald, which was 400. As protesters, one of the chants that protesters have been making is 400 days, 16 shots. So 400 days since the killing, more than 400 days since the killing of Laquan McDonald, to the day that Anita Alvarez announces the murder charges against Officer Van Dyke. Someone was asking me, a reporter from outside of Chicago, what is the sort of most charitable reading of Alvarez's decision to, her actions in this case? And I mean, there's really not a very charitable explanation I can come up with. She waits 400 days until the release of the video, because of the fight of Brandon Smith, who you just had on, and others. They're battling with the city for over 400 days to get this video out, and finally, when it's clear they're going to lose that case, that's when Alvarez announces the charges against Officer Van Dyke. So clearly, what should have taken a couple weeks, maybe a couple months at most, stretches out into over a year, assumedly because Alvarez hoped that none of this would ever come to light. And so, since it's come out, State's Attorney, the Attorney General, the Illinois Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, has called for this investigation from U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Something one could imagine, something like what we saw in Ferguson, which, if you remember, the federal report that came after Ferguson was the report that showed that there was this whole culture of whether it's corruption or sort of institutionalized. This is the report that said that the Ferguson police force was sort of nickel and diming its residents through really close policing in order to pay the bills, basically, charging semi-frivolous tickets to its residents, and there's really a sort of culture of harassment of its residents in order to sort of keep their coffers full, which led to this level of frustration that's happening there. So that one, the best case scenario, I think, is that a similar report that really takes stock of everything that's gone on, that's gone wrong in within Chicago law enforcement over the last few years, would take that into account. And of course, that would go far beyond this shooting to include other brutality complaints, but also things like Holman Square, which we got quite a bit of attention about earlier this year. This essentially what people were calling a black site of the Chicago Police Department, where people would disappear sometimes for days, and no one would know where they were without charges being filed against them. We, of course, have this history of being the city that had a police commander torture black men for almost 2 decades to get confessions out of them, who only recently, that case was wrapped up. So there's a lot here for an outside investigation to dig into.
Yeah, I got to say, I mean, just and I'm not, I don't normally pay attention to the policing practices of Chicago, but obviously I've been reading up over the past couple of days different stories that people have posted over the years, and it's shocking. I mean, you had a whistleblower come out from this independent police review authority who basically said, like, this entire process is completely compromised. Like, if we found something that they didn't want, they would just tell me to lie about it, and nothing was done. I mean, I don't even understand like how that works. Is there not even when you talk about Madigan, who's the attorney general, the state attorney general? I mean, what is the relationship that she has with a guy like Rahm? In other words, I would imagine, I mean, Rahm Emanuel tries to get out in front of this, right, by appointing an independent review board to review the Independent Police Review Authority, right, which starts sounding funny in a way if it wasn't so sick. I mean, he's obviously doing this to get out ahead of any type of review by the feds, essentially. But what can you tell me about that dynamic? And then I want to get a sense from you as to what you anticipate the feds, how they would, under what auspices they would investigate the police department.
Well, I to be honest, know little about what the relationship between Madigan and Emanuel is. I mean, just to go back to your point about this review board, it was, the WBEZ, the local NPR affiliate, reported earlier this year that there was a guy, this whistleblower you referenced. I mean, he gave these shocking statistics. I mean, something like 400 shootings in 1 year, only one of them being, pursued disciplinary action against the officer. The 97% of the complaints that are brought to this board result in no disciplinary action for an officer. And in this exact case, Officer Van Dyke had 18 complaints against him through this board, and somehow had never faced any kind of disciplinary charges, including a case that the city ended up settling for $350,000, in which he was involved in the arrest of a motorist who was accused of not having the front license plate, and then all of a sudden he has two broken arms when he's broken shoulders when he's cuffed. There's just insanity. 97% of complaints result in no disciplinary action. I mean, this one guy has 18 complaints against him, Officer Van Dyke, and nothing happens. It's sort of shocking stuff. And one wonders, of course, how this new board, as you mentioned, the board to review the board, would be any different. And I don't think many people here in Chicago believe that board is anything other than just something that's sort of tossed together to give the veneer that some kind of change is happening. I mean, why should this board be any different? Especially a board, the folks who are on this new task force that Emanuel has put together don't include anyone from the communities that are most affected by this violence. It's not anyone who has been organizing around these things. Deval Patrick, the former governor of Massachusetts, is the head of it. I mean, I don't think no one is sort of thinks that this board is meaning anything new for what's going on with the police force in Chicago.
Micah, give me the general sense. Like, I mean, how widespread is the outrage? I mean, is there, you mentioned that nobody on this independent task force, I guess, to review the independent authority is of the community, and Deval Patrick is the very least has a very good relationship with President Obama. I don't know if that extends to Rahm Emanuel. I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But certainly, I would imagine those type of relationships are more important if you're interested in not being held accountable for something than having the Attorney General come in, because the Attorney General significantly more independence, particularly on this type of stuff, it seems to me. But I mean, how widespread is it? Or is there a sense in Chicago that, like, well, Rahm is doing what he's got to do, and there's a lot of gunplay here, and I'm just curious. I have no sense of what who thinks what in Chicago at this point.
I think that in recent years and months, this huge number of these kinds of cases that we've seen around the country have gotten they've gotten lots of attention, but they've often polarized different places. People hunker down on the side of the police or on the side of racial justice activists who are mad about these shootings. What makes this case different is one, I mean, just the video itself. If you watch the video, this is a video of a police officer shooting an unarmed teenager, not even adult, 16 times. I mean, it's a really disturbing thing to watch. 13 or 14 of the shots hit his body when he's on the ground. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to watch. So the sort of brutality, the callousness of that act is one piece of this. But the other thing is that there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's no real charitable way to interpret how the city has handled this case. I mean, we're talking about 13 months from his death until the charges against Van Dyke are made. I mean, what is clear, which Brandon Smith has written quite a bit about, is that there's no way to interpret this other than a mass level of cover-up all throughout the city. I mean, the 16 shots is one thing, but then when you've got the entire city government apparatus acting in concert to try to cover this up for as long as possible, and what the other piece of it is that what it's clear, and I've seen this from quarters that are far from lefty progressive stalwarts in Chicago, sort of center right and politically centrist columnists in the city, saying it is clear that the reason that part of the reason that this was delayed so much was so that Rahm Emanuel could get reelected, because if this video had come out or back last year around October, November, December. This was, if you remember, the height of campaign season for Rahm Emanuel's reelection.
We spoke to you then.
Yeah, that's right. And, Emanuel was really being hammered by communities of color and by progressives for his neoliberal agenda that he's carried out in the city. And what so many people in the city are saying is that, of course, if this video had come out at that time, there was no way that he'd be able to win over he wouldn't have African-American leaders coming out and speaking in support of him. I mean, he probably would have lost a good chunk of the vote. I mean, it's very easy to imagine that he could not have won re-election if this tape had come out back then. So, I mean, from top to bottom, from the killing itself to the cover-up to the clearly sort of crass political maneuvering to delay the video's release to protect his reelection, I think there's a lot of widespread anger, not just from the kind of usual suspects, progressives and racial justice activists who get upset about these kinds of things, but the average Chicagoan really sees this as a pretty craven.
Right. It seems quite obvious to me, I mean, that it's not just even about his reelection. I mean, their intention, it seems, it's quite obvious, was to have this simply go away. I mean, the idea that it took them 14 months to bring about these charges and they just coincidentally had wrapped up their investigation just the week before this tape was forced to be released is a joke, right? I mean, they gave the family $5 million. I imagine there's a process involved in that, right? It doesn't just happen. I mean, tell me about the timing of that, because that also strikes me as sort of prima facie evidence that this was a cover-up, insofar as that the idea that they would be awarding compensation or some type of, damages to the family before there has been any type of administrative or judicial review seems really suspect to me.
I mean, that's the way that many police forces around the country operate, right? Is that that's why they're willing to pay these kinds of payouts, is because they want the cases
to
to
go
go
away.
away. Yeah, and that's clearly what happened in this situation. And credit goes to Brandon Smith, who preceded me on the show, to doggedly insist that that not be they not be able to cover this up and to have it go away.
And my understanding is that the city over the past couple of years has had to pay out like nearly $500 million. Is that right? In these type
Right.
of claims?
Yeah, I mean, it's enormous amounts of money, and we don't know the details on all of them. Obviously, I mean, the obvious question that one wonders when you see when you lay out the basic details of the case like this is, how many cases like this do we have no idea exist?
Right.
I mean, this is an extraordinary set of circumstances. There were community activists who go looking for journalists to fight to get this tape released because they know that how heinous this crime was, how heinous the killing of Laquan McDonald was, and so they have to go find a journalist who will then find a law firm who will represent him to fight the city for 13 months and spend who knows how much money fighting to get this tape release, and it takes them over a year. How many other cases, less heinous? Maybe there were 4 shots or 5 shots for someone who was 20 years old, not a teenager, fewer shots, but still an incredible crime. How many of those cases exist that we have no clue about? The other thing that is worth mentioning is that the officer who killed a 22-year-old African-American woman, Rakia Boyd, his name is Dante Servin. Her case has not gotten as much attention as the Laquan McDonald case, but is something that African-American young people have been organizing around for a long time in the city. Made her an important case in terms of the larger Black Lives Matter movement. The charges against him: he killed Rakia Boyd when he was off duty, and the announcement that he would be fired was finally made right around the same time that all this happened. So it was clear that the announcement of the murder charges and her case, she was killed several years ago, more than a year ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. No movement on firing this officer, not even charging him with murder, just firing him from the Chicago Police Department. There was no movement on that until the Laquan McDonald case. Until the tape was made public. So it's just extremely clear, I think, to the average person, that the city of Chicago is just throwing anything that they can to this case to try to placate people and make it go away.
All right. So lastly, realistically, do you think this is going to threaten, at the very least, I mean, I guess there's other questions, right? I mean, the city's DA, she's up for re-election in 2016. Rahm Emanuel isn't for, I guess, at least 3 years, right?
Yeah.
So do you think this is in any way going to threaten him?
Well, I'll just say first, and I write about this in the Vice piece, first to the question of Alvarez. I put this question to political scientist Dick Simpson, who is someone who lots of Chicagoans trust on what's going on in Chicago politics, yesterday, and he said that he did not hesitate when I asked him about Alvarez's future. He said she's done. There's no way that she wins re-election in the primary in March. She already had a challenger named Kim Fox, who was running to the left of her on criminal justice issues, and he said this really seals the deal for her. She's done. She's not. He didn't anticipate that she was going to be resigning before her term is up. I mean, she's a democratically elected official, but he thought there was no way that she wins re-election after this.
Apparently,
Emanuel.
I'm sorry. Apparently, Louis Gutierrez has just withdrawn his support for her.
Yeah, that's right.
Interesting.
Yeah, he released a letter where he alluded to private meetings that he had with her, pledging his support, and he pulled it as well. I mentioned in the piece that the part of the majority of the city's the city council's Latino caucus including Chuy Garcia, who's not on the city council, but he joined them, made an announcement earlier this week saying that they are calling for Alvarez to resign. So important segments of the Latino community, calling for her, saying that she's totally botched this and other cases and calling for her to resign. So the resignation might not happen, probably won't happen, but if you believe Dick Simpson, that she's done come March. Emanuel is probably not going to resign. As you mentioned, he has over 3 years left in his term. But it is, I watched the press conference where he was announcing McCarthy's firing yesterday, and I had never seen him so visibly kind of shaken and on the ropes, and I don't mean shaken in terms of out of moral concern for his family. He seemed like he was politically in a really tough spot. I mean, even during his re-election campaign, in which he was forced into a runoff by Chuy Garcia, he had always looked sort of secure in what he was saying. He seemed to have a sort of supreme confidence, and this is clearly one of, if not the most important political scandals in his time as mayor thus far. So, he won't be. I write in the piece that I don't think he'll be resigning anytime soon. On the other hand, things have been moving so quickly here in Chicago over just the last week that who knows where we'll be in the next week, and who knows what revelations will come to light. And if people like Brandon Smith, who are still filing FOIA requests and still fighting the city to get copies of emails and other correspondence about this case, if that reveals that Emanuel had a important role in trying to cover this up, again, I have nothing to make me think that he was intimately involved in covering the case up. But if some of those kind of emails were to be released, who knows where things could end up. We may see a very different Chicago even within the next couple weeks or months.
Micah Uetricht, associate editor in These Times magazine. We will link to the Vice article on Rahm Emanuel and what's happening in Chicago. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.